Situationen i Ukraine er stadig ikke afklaret, eftersom den nye overgangsregering i Kiev ikke har formået at samle nationen bag sig. Havde tidligere i dag den canadisk-ukrainske Danylo med direkte fra Canada. And joining us live on a Skype link from Canada are you, Danylo. Welcome to the program. First of all, try to describe to us what are the situation in Ukraine right now.
So as many people know, they're aware, it's in the news every day. There's currently a military intervention taking place in the Crimea, which is a semi-autonomous republic within Ukraine. Ukraine is a unitary state, and Crimea is a semi-autonomous republic within that state. There is a Russian military intervention taking place, where we have Russian soldiers on the ground that have seized, for all intents and purposes, all the administrative structures of that province. And of course, there are provocations going on in eastern Ukraine, where we have also seen some protests. We have seen some incursions, not military incursions so far, but we have seen people being bussed in from across the Russian border to protest, to create provocations, to create the picture of disunity.
How do the Ukrainian people react to the Russian military intervention?
I would say, and this is quite frankly not 100% surprising, but it is surprising. I would say that the Ukrainian people are more united today than they have been in decades. This intervention has very much so put a lot of people's support behind the interim government. This interim government that's in place right now is facing a whole host of extremely difficult economic challenges, which in any other normal circumstance would make it quite difficult to govern. But it looks like the majority of Ukrainians are very solidly behind this government, and the displays of unity are quite profound.
But what about the Russian intervention? Do people in Ukraine fear a real military conflict such as war, or do they still believe in a peaceful solution?
I think everybody wants a peaceful solution, but it would be a mistake to assume that Ukrainians would allow Crimea to separate without giving up, without giving any sort of fight. Of course, the military is no match for Russian forces, but we saw that after the Russian military intervention occurred, between 1 and 3 million people showed up at the reservist recruitment stations. So there's an appetite to defend their country.
Okay. There has been a revolution, a kind of revolution in Ukraine before the military intervention from Russia came. First of all, what movement are behind this revolution? Because you say that the people of Ukraine are united right now, but is this revolution supported by all Ukrainians?
Today, as it stands, and the military intervention plays some part in this. I would say that they're more united than ever before. Were they behind the original uprisings that were taking place in Kiev? Not everybody, but certainly the younger generation was. I mean, people between the ages of 16 to 35 predominantly supported Euro integration across all regions of the country. And it was something like in the 80th percentile. We have that from reliable polling companies. If anything, that support has grown over the past couple of months because of the events that have occurred, the shootings in Kiev, and then, of course, the intervention.
Is the generation span, you say that the younger generation primarily support the European-minded politicians?
I would say every day less and less so. And I need to point out a caveat in that when I say pro-Euro integration, this does not necessarily imply joining the European Union or even signing the association agreement, but it does imply support for all the things that people perceive Europe to stand for. So that is freedom, rights, the rights of mobility, a lack of corruption, free media, all these sorts of values that people see in a modern Europe. That is what they aspire to, and for them, Europe represents that. And yes, there is a divide. There was a divide originally when these uprisings started between the old and the young, but that's disappearing more and more.
But how do the young people feel about Russia? Because as you mentioned before, there's a lot of people actually supporting a kind of Russian intervention.
So we have to be very careful when we say supporting. The fact remains is that Western outlets, Western media does not have a lot of access to what's actually going on in Crimea today. As you know, the OSCE, the military observers have not been able to get in as of yet to actually fact find on the ground. Certainly in the cities of Crimea, there certainly is a pro-Russian element. But we can't confuse that between a pro-Russian element and a desire to join Russia or separate from Ukraine.
So a very diverse picture in Crimea. How do you see the picture of a future for a united Ukraine? Is that just a truth, or is there actually a discussion whether Crimea, for example, would be a part of Russia?
Listen, I think the facts as we know them today speak for themselves. The de facto prime minister now of Crimea, the person who was put in place by the Russian interveners, is named Sergei Aksyonov. And Mr. Aksyonov, quite frankly, if you look at the last electoral results, his party secured only 4% of the popular vote. So he's not somebody legitimate to lead Crimea, first of all. Secondly, they've set a referendum date for March 16th. How can this be legitimate? We've also seen that the questions have been released. So there are now 2 questions that are on the proposed ballots. Okay, and one is, the first question is, do you wish to join the Russian Federation? As an entity to join the Russian Federation. And the second question is, do you wish to revert to the Crimean Constitution of 1992, which is not in fact a legal constitution, but even if we accept it's a legal constitution, reverting back to that constitution basically means that they become an independent state, which then in the future will join Russia. Yeah. So basically the 2 questions are yes and yes. And the other fact we have presented before us is that and this was cited by the person who's leading the referendum, so to speak, and I say referendum in quotes. There have been 2.5 million ballots printed, and there are 1.5 million registered voters. So my view is that there would be no legitimate electoral result that would support the secession of Crimea in a free and fair election. And what we have here is not going to be a free and fair election. This so-called prime minister is wanted by the Ukrainian authorities on all sorts of charges. He's a former criminal gang lord. And as I said, he's somebody who in the last election only secured the mandate about 4% of the people within that party. It's a pro-Russian party, but yeah. And of course that parliament too. That parliament as well. When it called this ridiculous referendum, it did not have quorum.
So what's going to happen now? How do the Ukrainian government get rid of the Russians? Because I don't think that the Ukrainian people, and for that matter the government, are quite happy about the situation with Russian military intervention.
Well, the unfortunate answer is there is well, the first I mean, if the international community doesn't act, and I think that's problematic if they don't act forcefully. If they don't act, then I think we are going to see a protracted conflict, one that will take place over the next 10 to 30 years.
Yeah, this is obviously a youth television program, so if we're going to talk a little bit about the youth in Ukraine, what future are they going to see for Ukraine right now?
Well, they want to see primarily a European future. They travel a lot. They're on study programs abroad. A lot of the Eastern Partnership funding has been focused on exposing them to Western university, Western institutions. So they're not foolish, and they know what is possible. And of course, Ukraine is right next door to Poland. So a lot of Ukrainians travel there. They see the difference that economic freedom and prosperity have brought. And they desire the same thing, and that's perfectly natural. And as a result, they know which alternative, quite frankly, is more desirable. It's certainly not the Eurasian Union, which places them in line with areas like Kazakhstan or Belarus. These are not desirable alternatives for young Ukrainians.
Great, we're out of time. Thank you for joining us here, Danylo, live from Canada. Situationen i Ukraine udvikler sig hele tiden, men vi forlader den her i denne omgang.